have been asked to introduce our guest speaker for our luncheon meeting. When I decided to use the lyrics to The Circle of Life from The Lion King in my opening session, I never dreamed that I would be standing up here getting ready to introduce to you someone who was born and raised in Africa. Like you, I read about Dee Rohrs in the program, and like you, I was very impressed with her Rotary credentials. But I wondered, who is this woman? What is her backstory? That's what I'm getting ready to tell them. Dee Rohrs is a rebel and a troublemaker. She grew up in challenging countries and in challenging times, in Zambia, in Malawi, in Namibia, and South Africa. She could have enjoyed a very entitled and pampered life, but she was unable to tolerate injustice. She was unable to see the need and not to reach out and help. And in Dean's own words, she was unable to shut her big mouth. In her teens, Dean and her family moved to Zambia, soon to be confronted by a brutal civil war that broke out in Congo, just north of her home country. Dean's mother was the head of the Red Cross, and she and Dean together began trying to assist refugees who were fleeing Congo. At just 14, Dean found herself dealing with hundreds of refugees, many women and children, females from baby girls to women in their 90s, even nuns who had been raped, mutilated, or both. So I no longer ask myself, who is this woman and why has she thrown herself into Rotary, especially the Rotary Foundation? It is all too clear. Dean learned from an early age what having a humanitarian heart really meant, from parents who were Rotarians, to her mother's work with the Red Cross, to her dismay with apartheid, to seeing the effects of genocide on women and children. Dean's aha moment, as we like to say in Rotary, became so much more. It became a calling. As she found her place on the road unwinding, as it's referred to in the Circle of Life, Dean was indeed transformed. I'm honored to give you a true Rotarian and a kindred spirit, Rotary Foundation Trustee, Dee Rohrs.
My goodness, I am emotional. My father didn't approve of women in Rotary. He never recognized me, and he should have been here listening, shouldn't he? Well, hello, everybody. It really is my honor and privilege to be with you here today. It's been a wonderful weekend already, catching up with so many of you who are good friends and making so many more friends. And today we are sitting here together in the spirit of friendship and fellowship of our Rotary family to celebrate and honor Rotary and the impact that it has on the world. I'd like to thank my aides, Nancy and Author Ray, for all the care that you've given me. I couldn't have got and done and been where I was if you didn't herd me along. So thank you. Winston Churchill said, we make a life from what we get, we make a living from what we get, but we make a life from what we give. And I think beyond service above self, that might be the motto for Rotary, because we really do give. In the year ahead, you will be both giving and receiving as you lead your district through a year of adventures and opportunity and a surprising amount of personal growth. You've accepted this role of leadership in your districts, and you will be serving in 2023-2024 with two great leaders, President-elect Gordon McAnally and the Foundation Chair Barry Rassin. They're both wonderful, wonderful people to work with. It's going to be an exciting year for you all, and I look forward to seeing the great strides that you will make in growing Rotary in your districts. The personal development is something which is really hard to describe. You know, I look at what Rotary has meant to me over all the years. It has been my solace and the way that I have been able to deal with all the things that the experiences that I've had. And some of them have been pretty hard and really harsh, and one questions a lot about life. But Rotary does give you the answers. But sometimes it also gets you into trouble, right? I had the privilege of being the vice president, and I'm not a fancy person. I'm a very ordinary woman from Africa. We're not wealthy. I never sat on huge corporate boards or anything like that. I was never even an assistant governor. Anyway, here I suddenly find myself vice president of Rotary International. Now you serve at the pleasure of your president. Your president decides how they would like you to serve under them, how you work with them. And as I said, I think it was to the AGs or the DGNs, the reality is you wake up every single morning and make sure your president is alive. Because if he isn't, you're in trouble. Literally, the first week, our incoming president at that stage, Sam Awori, had a medical emergency and passed away. Sam was the most amazing gentleman, the most amazing scholar from Africa. He was my friend, he was my mentor. Ian Risley came to me, he was my president, and said, Dean, I need you to go to Uganda to represent Rotary at Sam Awori's state funeral. The first non-governmental person honored in that way in Uganda. It was the most incredible experience. It was to understand exactly who Sam was in Africa. It was to understand what Rotary meant in Africa. But it was also extremely intimidating. I had to deliver the eulogy in the cathedral on the last day. He had a state parade, brought him through to the cathedral. Sam's coffin was there. It was more than 1,000 people in the cathedral and people outside with screens. All the heads of state from many of the African countries were sitting there. And I had to deliver the eulogy. I had the most amazing police escort. She was a young woman, a policewoman. She always had a gun on her side, and she took me everywhere, and she cared for me, and she insisted on carrying my purse. About 5 minutes before I had to go up, she tapped me on my shoulder and passed me my lipstick. She said, 5 minutes to showtime, put your lips on. Before I came up here, I literally said to myself, yeah, girl, it's 5 minutes to showtime, put your lips on. When I rose to go up, literally intimidated, the leadership of Africa in Rotary rose with me. They came and they stood side by side with me, and we all linked hands. And to me, that's a symbol of what Rotary does. When you have a minute of need, when you need the support, be it personal or within Rotary, somebody is always there to stand by your side and to help and guide you. Well, there was another time when Ian said to me, he called me, I think it was on a Tuesday, and said, what are you doing this weekend? I said, well, I guess I'm doing what you're telling me to do. But you have to go to Brazil, to Curitiba, for a water summit and do a presentation on my behalf. So there I was with my little carry-on suitcase and literally my one pair of shoes off to Brazil. I got met and I got taken to this hotel. Up we went in the elevator. They dropped me in front of these huge doors and said, "Goodbye, Mrs. Rohrs, we'll see you in the morning." When I walked through those doors, I nearly passed out. I was in the presidential suite, and I had 9 rooms to myself. But the impression on that was in the hallway as you came in were photos of all the amazing people that had slept in that suite, that had served there. And it was every one of the rock stars that you ever saw. I mean, it was Elton John, Rod Stewart, Aretha Franklin, all of them. You had all the opera singers. You had all the presidents of the United States, kings and queens. And there's Dean Rohrs. But they also had pictures of the last popes on the wall. Well, I went to the bathroom, looked at this bathroom, which in fact was about 4 rooms in itself, and that sparkling porcelain that I knew was going to come in contact with my little butt. I thought to myself, "Oh dear Dean, you are sitting on holy ground." It's taken me some time, really, to make a decision on what I'm really going to talk to you about. But I thought to myself, let's talk about one word. That's courage. The courage that many people call upon to survive in this world today, and the courage that you, as president-elects, are going to need to get you through this journey. The definition of courage is the quality of mind or spirit that enables a person to face difficulty, danger, pain without fear, but with bravery. So what immediately springs to one's mind is the courage that is being displayed in Ukraine with this unnecessary war, the courage the victims of the earthquake in Turkey and Syria are displaying, and all of those that are facing these huge disasters. Malawi, Mozambique at the moment with the floods, with a hurricane that lasted a month and hit them twice. But let's think about those that are fleeing from untenable situations, the women in cultural situations where they have absolutely no choice of their own and are owned by others, slavery and just sheer poverty. Our world is full of anxiety and strife today. We look at what we have come to accept as daily occurrences. The war in Ukraine, even horrific events in our own communities. And I would venture to say that here, sitting with us today, are some who need courage for them to get through their daily lives. But proudly, in Rotary, we are there. We also emphasize diversity, equity, and inclusion. But if we're realistic, we have a very long way to go in our societies. You know, our whole social structure has been slow to change from a very male-dominated, patriarchal society. And I must say something different. I wish I could say something different. But patriarchy is as prevalent around the world as racism and xenophobia are. We can't hide from it. And even here, we run across it. It's in our society, and we need to address it. But it takes great courage for people to change. It's a fight being fought at all levels, and sometimes we win the fight, but sometimes we don't. As president-elects and leaders in your clubs, there are going to be times that you will need this courage to make decisions that are not always easy to make. You need the courage of your convictions and the support of those around you to do the right thing. Elizabeth Stanton said, "The best protection any woman can have is courage." But I would suggest that applies to both men and women, and especially to you as you lead your districts in the year ahead. But to continue a little bit in this vein, and because I'm a woman, I'm going to tell you a few women's stories. The first one took place in my community. You might have the same organizations in your community. We call it Dress for Success. It is a day where you provide for women who have had years of abuse, have lived on the street, or recovering addicts, who are entering their work community again, who are wanting to go back to normal life. Think of that. These are women who have absolutely nothing, but they have to go for a job interview. So we provide them with business clothes, with the ability to have their hair done and makeup, and just spend the day with them, authenticating them, saying you are ready to do it. Well, I was standing next to a woman, and I looked at her, and she was looking at herself in the mirror, and tears were running down her face. And she looked at me and she said, "Today, for the first time in 10 years, I see the me that I always knew I were, and not the me that the world has had to see." Rotary was there at her side. This was a district grant that we were using to make this happen. So the little things and the big things are there to be used and that you can deal with. And you know, I really think back on that, and I can only imagine the courage that she must have had, knowing this reinvention of herself and the fact that she was taking on a challenge. A few years back, while doing polio immunization in northern Nigeria, I was dropped off under a tree with a Rotaractor translator and an immunization team from the local authorities. And this was after a very dusty trip on really, really bad roads. Well, they dropped us off in this tree, and I really, when I saw that van disappearing, I thought, nobody's ever going to find me again. Because this was an area right up in northern Nigeria with Boko Haram. We had no protection, we had no soldiers. But we sat there under the tree, and women came to us through these chilly fields and through the bush, and they brought their babies to be vaccinated. When the afternoon came, when the time came when the evening meal is being prepared, they stopped coming. We were just sitting there waiting, and so I turned around to the headman of the village. He was sort of the most senior elder. Said to him, "Can I walk around? Can I look at these compounds?" Being a woman, and this being a Muslim society, I was welcome within the compounds and could go in. Well, we did find some babies that hadn't been vaccinated. But in doing this walk around in the village, I came across a very simple well with a bucket and a rope. But there were a whole crowd of little girls around this well collecting water. They were about 9, 10, 11 years old. They would pull up the water, put it on top of their heads, and off they would go. Well, it's a little puzzling. I said, "Well, where are they going? Because here are the compounds." And then the gentleman told me that there are 2 communities in the area. The one furthest away was 2 kilometers away from where we were. Those little girls walked every single day to come and fetch water and walk back. When I got back to the tree, I turned to this gentleman and I asked him, "What does it cost to dig a simple well?" And when I got back to my hotel that night, I took out my spending money, my little bit of emergency travel funds, and I laid them out on the bed. And you know what? That little bit I had was enough to dig 2 more wells in those 2 communities, and also to rehabilitate that well in the village. How little it took to change lives. Because 10 months later, I had photos of the Canadian wells. And every time I look at them, I remember how little it took to make a difference. I remember the sight of those little girls with their dusty little bare feet, their strong little backs, their buckets of water on the top that were spilling down their backs, as they took off down these paths through the bush. And I thought to myself, they were not only facing with courage, the situation of not going to school, of having to bring water every day, but they were also facing with courage the lives that lay ahead of them. They had very little future. Rotary was helping, and in time we've been back to that community, and now we have full sanitation blocks and a whole proper well with a full pumping system. So that's what Rotary does. Bona from the band U2 says, "The circumstance of our birth should not dictate whether we live or die, whether we have equal opportunity or not, whether we sleep in poverty or not." And this makes me think of a story that happened about 8 years ago. I was together with some social workers and Rotarians in one of the most horrific areas that I know. This is a squatters' camp outside of Johannesburg called Zandspruit. There are more than 1 million people living there in shacks with no water, no sanitation, no education, nothing, no hope. And there are all these little children. Well, I had this young girl come running up to me, and she thrust a brand new baby into my arms, and she said, "Please take my baby, make him yours." You know, I said to her, "Why? Why would you want to take me to take your baby?" And she said, "I'm 14 years old. I have no education. I'm a prostitute. And I have AIDS. What future is there for my baby?" Well, Rotary was there. The social services were there. And they literally scooped her up. And today, 8 years later, she has graduated from high school and she's at university on a Rotary scholarship learning to be a social worker. But the best thing is, she and her baby were safe because Rotary was there to support the actions that were needed. Now, her name was Elizabeth, and I will never forget that because my oldest daughter is Elizabeth. But doesn't this symbolize exactly what we are doing in our mission of empowering girls? You empower a girl like that, you change a community, you change a country. We need to be there, and we are. When we talk about courage, we have to acknowledge one man who stands out above many for having the courage to remain a true humanitarian, morally and ethically uncompromised, but courageous beyond compare, and despite every injustice that came his way. And his name is Nelson Mandela. A man I knew, a man I loved. In one of his books, he has a quote which I think is so relevant to us as Rotarians because it describes exactly what our lives are. He said, "I have walked this long road to freedom. I have tried not to falter. I have made missteps along the way, and I have discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. But I take a moment to rest, to steal a view of the beautiful vista that surrounds me, to look back at the distance that I have come. But I can only rest for a moment, because with freedom comes responsibility, and I dare not linger, for my long walk is not ended." That is Rotary. Nelson never wavered from having the courage to make a difference and then doing it. In my mind, this truly, truly is what our duty is as Rotarians. We walk to bring peace and equality to this world until there is peace and equality in this world. Our task to eradicate violence and injustice against both men and women in any form is never done. Our fight against polio, until it's totally gone, is never done. We know the needs, and we are doing something about it. So walking our road to freedom ultimately is what makes us an effective human being. So together, both inside and outside of our communities, we must be there to offer all of humanity absolutely equal respect and opportunity to walk the freedom walk so that they can have their dreams come true. As club presidents, you can guide and motivate your club members to look to the future, to embrace the change, to become relevant to today and tomorrow, to offer the gift of Rotary to everybody that you meet. Think of the legacy that you are going to leave behind you. Make it significant. Make it something that puts a smile on people's faces and they say to you, you have served well. May you now all walk in peace as you so courageously go forward as leaders of your districts. Take courage that you are doing what is right for world peace, and please celebrate and enjoy your year in office. Thank you.